tap rooms, breweries, wineries and distilleries, bakeries. A lot of times those particular types of businesses are going to participate mostly in wholesale. And so in order to be able to qualify for the RRF program, you need to show that your on-site sales to the public comprise at least 33% of gross receipts. And again, in this situation, the key word is on-site sales. So having people come in and purchase directly from you. So who is ineligible? So sometimes deciding whether you're eligible for a program, it's easier to figure out who's ineligible. So if you are a state or local government operated business, you are ineligible. As of March 13th, 2020, if you own or operate more than 20 locations. So something that's different about the Restaurant Revitalization Fund in comparison to some of our other programs is there's not a cap for gross receipts or revenues. It's based off location and affiliates. So as long as you have 20 or less locations, then you are able to qualify for this particular direct funding. If you have applied for the SBOG or the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, you are not eligible if you've been approved or if you have a pending application with SBOG. However, if you have been denied for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, then you can in fact apply for RRF. You are ineligible if you are a publicly traded company. The one exception here is if you own a franchise and the franchisor is a publicly traded company, you may be able to qualify for RRF. You'll want to check on our franchise directory through the SBA. There's also paperwork that you can file in order to get your franchise added if you are not listed there, but we're going to talk more about that in just a minute. You do not qualify if your business is permanently closed. This does not include temporary closings due to COVID-19. So if you had to shut down, and you're planning on opening back up, or you were able to open up and then close again, or temporary, again, any temporary closings are not the same as permanently closed. You are ineligible if you are a nonprofit organization, and also if you are not eligible for funding of at least $1,000.
So we have one question from Anna, and she's asking, can you apply for funding as a startup?
Kind of yes and no. So if you have in 2020, 2021, have purchased a location and you have costs, but you've never been able to open your doors. So you've done build out, or you've hired people and started training them, but you were never able to open your doors because of COVID, then yes. However, if you are looking to start a business tomorrow, then the answer is no. The SBA does have other loans available to help you with startup funding. However, for RRF, this would not apply to you. So this is for specifically businesses that have seen a loss in their gross receipts due to the impact of COVID-19.
That Emma said she didn't start the recording until 12:11. Can we cover the first part again?
For RRF, $28.6 billion was set aside during the American Rescue Plan Act for restaurants, and it will remain until it is completely expended, and you can spend the money through March 11th, 2023. Basically, eligibility requirements mean that your primary purpose is serving food and or drink. And so if you fall into that category, then you are most likely eligible. This also includes businesses like bakeries, brew pubs, wineries, where most of their business would be wholesale, but they do at least 33% of gross receipts in on-site sales. How much are you eligible for? So SBA may provide funding of up to $5 million per location. not to exceed $10 million total for the applicant and any affiliated businesses. So if you have 2 businesses, you can get up to $10 million. If you have 20 businesses, you can get up to $10 million. And so it's capped off at that amount. The minimum award amount is $1,000. So one of the things that we keep getting asked is, how is this program different from other programs? As I mentioned earlier, our goal here is to get funding into the hands of the smallest of small and the restaurants that are really struggling. And so we wanted to make this process as streamlined and easy as possible. And so for some of our previous programs, applicants needed to register within sam.gov. They needed to share their DUNS or cage identifier. And so in this situation, generally speaking, when you're registering on sam.gov, that is our government contracting site. And as a restaurant, you are most likely not going to be government contracting. And so it seemed like it would just be a wasted time for you all. And so, as we mentioned, we wanted to get this out as easily as possible for those restaurant and business owners. Valid unexpired ITINs are acceptable. And you can check in on these ITINs and ITIN expiration facts. I'll send this particular PowerPoint to Emma so that she's able to distribute it after the presentation for those of you who have joined us today. So these are hot linked and you're able to go directly to some of these sites we're mentioning. So what forms of organization are eligible for RRF? C corporations, S corporations, partnerships, LLCs or limited liability companies, sole proprietorships, self-employed individuals, independent contractors, tribal businesses, and then LLC that are taxed as S corporations or sole proprietors. You'll notice that there are a couple asterisks on this particular slide as well. And basically what it's suggesting here is that B corporations are also eligible for RRF, but they need to select which way they're taxed. So they're either going to be taxed as a C corporation or an S corporation. And so they need to go back and look at their tax forms from 2019 and 2020 and see how they are being taxed, and it needs to match. Same with if you are self-employed or a sole proprietor, you'll want to look back at your tax forms and make sure that you are selecting the same distinction that you've been using on your tax paperwork so that it matches. Franchises are, as I mentioned, eligible for this particular program as long as they're meeting all other program requirements. The franchise must be listed on the SBA franchise directory. And in the application portal, applicants will be able to look up their entity. So it's already in there. It'll populate. If you are not listed in the directory, then you want to reach out to the franchisor and you want to submit the franchise disclosure documents or other agreements, whatever you have for your franchising agreement, and all other documents a franchise is required to sign to and you want to send that to franchise@sba.gov. And this way they're able to review it and look at the eligibility criteria, make sure that you cross all those T's, dot all those I's, and then they'll be able to determine whether or not your particular franchise is eligible. Okay, so who is eligible as far as bankruptcy goes? If you have had a bankruptcy, depending on what type of bankruptcy you have experienced in the past, you are most likely eligible. So if you have filed a Chapter 10, Chapter 12, or Chapter 13, and have already gone through the process and your bankruptcy has been confirmed with an approved plan of reorganization, then your company is in fact eligible. Okay. If you are currently in the process of bankruptcy and your bankruptcy has not been confirmed and you're not under that approved plan, unfortunately, you are ineligible. Okay. An applicant is also ineligible if they are permanently closed. So remember, that doesn't include temporary closures. If you have filed a Chapter 7 liquidation bankruptcy, or you're not under an approved plan of reorganization. Let's talk a little bit about affiliation. As I mentioned in the beginning, there are no particular gross receipt requirements or caps in the RRF program. However, your affiliations cap out at 20. So you must count all locations owned or operating under your applicant business's EIN and your applicant business's affiliates, even those that are not eligible for RRF. So it gives a couple of examples here. So any entity that together with its affiliates owns or operates more than 20 locations, regardless of whether the business operate under different names or are different types of businesses, is not eligible for RRF. For example, if your business and its affiliates own 16 dry cleaners and 5 restaurants, your business has 21 locations, which means your business is not eligible for RRF. I also wanted to clarify that these have to be physical locations. So if you are a caterer or if you own food trucks, generally speaking, you're going to have one permanent location. So you'll have kind of like a headquarters, and then you'll go out to do catering, or you'll drive to different locations with your trucks. So in this case, it would count as one physical location. So you don't need to count each truck as an affiliate business. To continue with our affiliate definitions here, this also will include locations owned or operated by a single corporate group. This will count toward the 20 location maximum limit for eligibility and the 10 million aggregate limit on RRF. So again, if there's 10 million is the cap. If there's 20, 10 million is the cap. If you have partnerships, and let's say that your partner owns, 50% of, or 51% of your business, and then they also are owning, 50% of other businesses, those other businesses will count as affiliates. So if they own more than 20% of your business, any of their affiliates can be counted as well. So this is something else to consider. So when you're filling out your RRF application, you'll be asked if the applicant has affiliates. You must select yes if the RRF eligible applicant entity has an equity interest or right to profit distributions of 50% or greater of one or more other businesses or entities. You must also select yes if any owner of 20% or greater equity interest of the RRF eligible applicant entity has an equity interest or right to profit distributions of 50% or greater in other businesses. You also must select yes if the applicant business is a holding company or management company that owns or manages a business other than the applicant's business. So how do our other SBA programs impact the RRF program? Any funds that you received through PPP or the Paycheck Protection Program will be subtracted from your final funding amounts. And the way that this will be verified is by using the EIN that was associated, the ITIN or the Social Security number associated with its PPP loans. So you want to make sure that when you are applying for RRF, that you are applying for it using the same EIN, ITIN, Social Security number. So however you applied for your first draw PPP, you also want to apply for your RRF the same way, okay? If an applicant applied for a first draw PPP loan for multiple locations under one EIN, and then subsequently applied for second draw PPP loans under different EINs, the applicant must provide the EINs for each entity that received second draw PPP loans. Also, if you are currently, if you have an application pending for PPP, whether it's a first draw, second draw, you must withdraw that application before applying for RRF. And the reason why is, as we mentioned before, your PPP is being subtracted out of RRF. And so until it has been fully funded, it's unclear what that amount may end up being. And so we want to make sure that we are withdrawing any outstanding PPP applications. Again, also, if you have an SVOG application in, you are not eligible for RRF. This is just something to let you know. All applicants must certify that current economic uncertainty makes the funding request necessary to support ongoing or anticipated operations. This is true for every single business. So with the uncertainty of COVID, this is going to mean that funding is necessary, right? especially when shutdowns are happening again in various counties in Oregon. So this is just for you to self-certify. So just be aware that it's there. So what are the eligible uses of funds? So we've got basically your daily operating costs, right? So payroll costs, utility payments, rent, mortgage, supplies, raw materials, any supplier costs, insurance, marketing fees, legal fees, point of sale equipment, and so on and so forth. So again, all of that daily operations expense is eligible. One of the biggest questions we have been getting asked is, can I use this to pay my debts? And the answer is yes, but there can't be any prepayments. So one of the big questions is, can I use this to pay off my economic injury disaster loan or EIDL loan? You can make the monthly payments, or you can pay anything to catch up. So if you're behind on payments, then you can use RRF for that. However, you cannot prepay. So you wouldn't be able to pay off the full amount of what's left on your EIDL. Credit cards, because in a perfect world, the idea of credit cards is to pay them off at the end of the month. You can use RRF to pay off credit cards that have been used for eligible expenses for your business. So that is something that you are able to do. And then Anna, credit lines, they are able to pay off, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. And I just want to note that as far as back pay, you need to make sure that the expenses were and/or are incurred between February 15th, 2020 and the end of the cover period, which is March 11th, 2023. So you can back pay as far as February 15th, 2020.
Thank you for the clarification, Anna. Excellent. And for construction expenses, if you incurred costs, like Anna said, between that particular period, so between March 15th, 2020 and going into the future until, February 15th, 2020, and then March 11th, 2023, if you need to construct outdoor seating or parklets or expand your outdoor seating, those construction costs are covered through RRF. If you needed to, redesign the inside of your business as far as seating goes in order to allow for you to follow the COVID restrictions, those would be construction expenses that are covered. However, if you just wanted to expand and add, more seating or build basically another wing or purchase another restaurant, these are not costs that are covered or construction costs that are covered by RRF. One of the questions that we were asked specifically in another one of these webinars had to do with food trucks. You can use RRF. Let's say that during COVID, one of your food trucks broke down and you just, you didn't have the funding to fix it. You can use RRF to fix that truck or to replace that particular truck. However, if you just wanted to buy more trucks, this would be considered expansion, and this would not be covered under RRF. When do you have to use the funds? So again, the expenses must have been incurred between February 15th, 2020 and March 11th, 2023. If your business does in fact permanently close after receiving the funds, the covered period ends as the day that your business permanently closes, or it can extend out to March 11th, 2023, whichever one of those occurs sooner. Any of the funds that are not spent, so if you did have to permanently close, if you didn't spend everything by March 11th, 2023, then any additional funding would need to be returned to the government. So you will need to keep a use of funds assessment. So after the total awarded funds have been exhausted, you're going to ask to provide a detailed expenditure report and certify, so sign, that these are valid numbers for the required period. So again, that's up until March 11th, 2023. There's also, until applicant completes the use of funds assessment beginning December 2021, applicants are required to provide self-reported unaudited data detailing use of distributed funds each year through 2023. And SBA will provide additional guidance on how this is going to work over the next few weeks. And so what is reporting going to look like as we continue on? So again, our goal was to get this particular program launched and start processing those applications, and then they'll work out some of those guidelines and details for how we're going to report. So watch for that in the future. So how should you calculate your potential fund amount or your potential award amount? So calculation 1, this is for applicants that have been in operation prior to or on January 1st of 2019. This will be the easiest calculation. So this will be 2019 gross receipts minus 2020 gross receipts, and then subtracting out any PPP loans that you have received, okay? So this will be the most upfront. For calculation 2, this is for applicants that begin operations partially through 2019. And so if your business started in July of 2019, or if, let's say that there was some kind of shutdown for your business, you had to, there was a fire or something along those lines, then you can also use this calculation. So the way that this would work is you take average 2019 monthly gross receipts, multiply those by 12, minus 2020 gross receipts, and subtract out any PPP loan amounts. If you are somebody who falls into this category, you may use calculation 2 or 3, which we're going to get to in just a second. But calculation 3, because it's a little bit more complex and involves more paperwork and documentation, it may make the process go a little bit slower. So let's talk a little bit about calculation 3. So calculation 3 is going to be for applicants that began operations on or between January 1st, 2020 and March 10th, 2021. And also applicants not yet open but have incurred eligible expenses as of March 11th, 2021. So this might actually be a good time for me to define what began operations means. And so when we're talking about beginning operations, this means that you're actually selling something. And so you may have received, the keys in January, but not able to open your business yet, or you weren't able to do your first sale until July, right? And so when we're talking about began operations, it's that day that you were able to start making sales. So again, applicants that began operations on or between January 1st, 2020 and March 10th, 2021, and applicants not yet open but have incurred eligible expenses as of March 11th, 2021. The way that you would calculate this is you take the total amount spent on those eligible expenses between February 15th, 2020 and March 11th, 2021. And then you subtract out 2020 and 2021's gross receipts through March 11th, 2021, and then subtract out any PPP loan amounts. So there's an additional kind of little caveat. We're calling it calculation 4, but basically what this means is if you operate multiple businesses and one of them started in 2018, but one of them didn't start until 2020, you may need to use different calculations. So you may use calculation 1 and calculation 3, and so you can use multiple calculation types and then add those together. So aggregated funding amount is limited to $5 million again per location, and 10 million total for the applicant. So you are able to use what we call calculation 4 to help with those varying situations for each of your businesses. So what can you exclude from your gross receipts? You can exclude your PPP loans, so you want to subtract those out. You can subtract out SBA Section 1112 payments. You can subtract out your economic injury disaster loan or EIDL loans, any EIDL advance, targeted EIDL advance, or any other funds received via the CARES Act. You can also remove any state and local business grants, or if you receive the Randolph-Shepard Act financial relief and restoration payments, or FRRP, you may also remove those from gross receipts. So how do you go about applying? You can apply directly through the SBA platform at restaurants.sba.gov. You can also, through limited point of sale or POS system vendors, you are able to apply. So right now, Toast and also Square, you can apply directly through them right now on their platforms. That's basically the only information that we have on how to go about that. You can reach out to them if they are your POS provider. We are also working closely with other point of sale servicers. So as an example, Clover and Aloha, they have set up their POS reports to integrate with our system. And so this can be a really quick way to move through the application process if you have access to those POS reports. You are also, if you're somebody who just computers are not your thing, you are able to apply through the telephone at 844-279-8898. Just please be aware that any telephonic applications will have longer processing time. So what documents are going to be required? First, you're going to have to fill out the application, which we refer to as SBA Form 3172, and it needs to be completely filled out, initial and signed. So you need to go through that DocuSign process for it to satisfy the total requirement. You will need to fill out the verification for tax information. So Form 4506. Basically, this one just gives us permission to look at your taxes and get certain tax information from the IRS. This is included on the application form or through the portal as you're going through. We'll also be looking for gross receipts documentation. So you can use any of these types here. So if you can use your business tax returns, so IRS Form 1120 or our IRS Form 1120S, 1040 Schedule C, 1040 Schedule F. For partnerships, you can use IRS Form 1065, including K1s. We will accept bank statements, and we will also accept externally or internally prepared financial statements, such as income statements or profit and loss statements. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, point of sales reports, including IRS Form 1099K. So the gold standard here is going to be your business tax returns. This will be the fastest for us to process. Point of sale would be right up there with it. The other ones, because they have not been third-party verified, so if you have internally prepared financial documents, the process may take us a little bit longer to comb through. Also, if you are somebody who happens to run off a fiscal year rather than a calendar year, you may have your taxes from 2019, but for you, 2020 hasn't ended yet. So you would want to include your tax returns and then also one of the other forms and calculate it out at the calendar year level. So required for calculations 1 and 2, again, you got to finish that application. We need that 4506T signed to allow us access to your IRS information and tax information. 2019 gross receipts, i.e. your tax returns, is a requirement. Most recent 3 months of bank statements. And this is just to verify your banking information and to verify that you are a legitimate business. Okay, so just 3 months of bank statements. You also want your 2020 gross receipts, and you want to use at least one of these. So if you have your 2020 federal tax return, awesome. You can also use your point of sale report. Again, these two are preferred because it will allow us to move through them more quickly. Also accepted externally or internally prepared financial statements, as mentioned before, and or profit and loss statements, signed, dated, and certified as to the accuracy by the applicant. Okay. So for calculation 3, everything that we mentioned before, as far as, if you have bank statements, completing the application, those sort of things. But you'll also see included in here that you can use both your tax returns and point of sales reports for 2020, 2021. And then you can include other documentation. So one of the ways to try and get it processed faster, if you are using internal or external financial statements, is to reach out to a third-party accountant, bookkeeper, or CPA to see if they would be willing to provide you with a comfort letter. Basically, what this means is, I haven't prepared the documents myself, but I've looked these over. They look pretty solid. They look accurate. And so this will help for it to process a little bit faster. It is not a requirement. It is just something that if you have a good relationship with your bookkeeper, CPA, accountant, then this can help the process go a little bit faster. And then again, you can also include documentation such as payroll documents, outdoor seating expenditures, so invoices and payments, and then also business debt. So any of your lender loan statements can be included as well. So what documents do I need in order to apply? In addition to the documents on the prior slide, if you own one of the previously asterisked types of businesses, brew pubs, tasting rooms, tap rooms, breweries, wineries, distillery, bakeries, or inns, you will need to show that your on-site, so remember that's the key word here, on-site sales to the public comprise at least 33% of gross receipts for 2019. If your business opened in 2020, or if you haven't been able to open yet, you want to show that your business plan or your original business idea accounted for 33%. So the plan was that the business model is going to show that you intended to have 33% of gross receipts or more in on-site sales to the public. Now, when we're talking about inns, I wanted to also make sure that we define inn. So this is a specific NAICS code. This does not include hotels or motels. And so I wanted to make that clear as well. So how do you get help with applying? You can call the call center hotline, which is 1-844-279-8898. This is going to be if you have any technical issues or specific questions regarding the application and requirements, you want to call this call center hotline. You can call us at the local SBA district office, but please know that we do not have access specifically to this portal. So we are limited in the amount of help that we can give you. We can answer questions about eligibility and calculation, but other than that, if it has anything to do with the actual application, we're not really able to assist on that level. Also, just know that the call center hotline has help available in multiple languages. And they also have the application in multiple languages as well. Right, so best practices of making sure that this application gets through and in a timely fashion is to provide complete documentation. So make sure that everything is fully filled out, that you've included all of the required documentation, because without it, it will be rejected, and this could add days onto the processing, and it could also jeopardize you being able to receive an award in general. So please make sure that you are double checking that. Leverage your resources if you can. So it's, as I mentioned before, it's not required, but reach out to your accountant and see if they can help you go over some things. Make sure it looks good. Make sure you have all the documentation you need to ensure that your application is complete and accurate, okay? Application corrections. SBA is not able to make corrections on behalf of applicants. So applicants who require corrections will need to contact the call center hotline in order for those corrections to be made. And they'll most likely send your application back to you if there's a major correction. Applicants who still intend to apply for PPP, again, you are not able to do RRF and PPP at the same time. Okay, so if you have already received PPP, you've been awarded your PPP, that's totally fine. You just subtract those out of RRF, but you don't want to get RRF and then apply for PPP on top of it or at the same time. Okay. So when can you apply? So actually starting as of yesterday, we started accepting applications. So as of May 3rd, we started with a pilot period for a week to try and work out some of the kinks and bugs. And we now have what we call a priority period. So it will be 21 days, so 20 days from today. And during the initial priority period, we will only process applicants that belong to these specific priority groups. So we're looking at women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, and socially and economically disadvantaged applicants. So they will first be processed and funded within those 21 days. If you are not part of the priority groups that I just mentioned, you are still able to apply. So get those applications in, and on day 22, all other eligible applicants will be processed and funded as we go through. So how do we determine if we are someone who, if our business falls into this priority group? So a small business that is at least 51% owned by one of the priority groups and is managed on a daily basis by one of those priority groups would fall into the priority category. So again, this includes women, veterans, and socially and economically disadvantaged. Applicants are going to self-certify on the application that they meet the eligibility. But please note that these applications will be audited. And so they will randomly select applications to audit in the future. So please make sure that you are being honest in this, okay? You are also able to do what we call stacking. So let's say that your business has 3 owners. Each one of them owns roughly 33% of the company. If one is a woman and one is a veteran and one doesn't fall into priority category, the woman and veteran, you add those up together, it's 66%. This would be a priority group business. Okay, so we are allowing for those to stack. So definition wise, what constitutes socially disadvantaged individuals? So these are those who have been subjected to racial or ethnic prejudice or cultural bias because of their identity as a member of a group without regard to their individual qualities. Individuals who are members of the following groups are presumed to be socially disadvantaged. So this is Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, including Alaska Natives and Native Hawaiians, Asian Pacific Americans, or subcontinent Asian Americans. If you belong to any of the groups that I just mentioned, it is also presumed that you have experienced some economic disadvantage as well, okay? There are other groups who fall into socially disadvantaged individuals. This is going to include groups like the LGBTQ+, as well as disabled persons. And so you would fall into socially disadvantaged. And so you would be able to qualify from that perspective. However, you would also need to prove that you have been economically disadvantaged. So the definition for economically disadvantaged are those socially disadvantaged individuals whose ability to compete in the free enterprise system has been impaired due to diminished capital and credit opportunities as compared to others in the same business area who are not socially disadvantaged. So as I mentioned, this is a self-certification. However, if you belong to one of the groups that I mentioned as far as LGBTQ+, or someone who is disabled, then if you were audited, you would need to provide proof that you are also economically disadvantaged. And so this could be an explanation or documentation. Eligibility as priority group applicants, entity reorganization for purposes of qualification for the priority period will result in automatic disqualification of the award. So we did have to put this out there because we were getting phone calls from lawyers and things of that nature, from clients that were asking them to reorganize so that they could make it that, you know, a woman in the group now owns 51%. And so this, if you do try to reorganize, you will have automatic disqualification. So I believe the cutoff was March. As I mentioned in the beginning, the goal for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund was to get money into the hands of the smallest of small businesses. And so because of that, out of that $28.6 billion that we discussed in the beginning for the RRF program, they have set aside an additional $9.5 billion for the smaller restaurants. So there's $5 billion in set asides for applicants with 2019 gross receipts of not more than 500,000. An additional $4 billion is set aside for applicants with 2019 gross receipts from $500,001 to $1.5 million. An additional $500 million is set aside for applicants with 2019 gross receipts of not more than $50,000. And with that, that ends our presentation. So if we have any questions, I know Anna was in the chat box, so I'm sure most of those are answered, but feel free to ask away.
There is one question that we haven't addressed.
Okay.
It just disappeared. 1 second. So my 2019 corporate tax return 1120S just amended, e-filed by my CPA. Review of 2019 bank statements showed discrepancy in gross sales expenses. IRS is moving slowly. What if IRS hasn't put in amended return into tax transcript form yet? I'm happy to answer that question.
I was like, that's going to be an Anna question. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So because you're going to be required to upload your tax documentation, as Ashley already pointed out. So just make sure to include that amended return, and then it's certified by your CPA. So as long as we have that documentation, if it can't be verified by the IRS, we understand that there are holdups within the IRS. So you should be fine as long as you upload that amended return.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Anna. I think this question has already been answered. How will the funds be allocated a certain percent based on one lump sum?
What is the question?
Oh, how will the funds be allocated? Is a certain percent based or one lump sum? Okay, so is it asking if you're going to get a full lump sum or if it's going to be divided?
It'll be one lump sum.
Okay.
Does the originally filed 2019 also need to be uploaded? Yes. So the 2019 tax return is a requirement if you were open previous or in 2019, then yes, it is a requirement.
So this is Lynn, she's directly following up to her original question about the amended return versus the original. So I think it's fine to upload that 2019, but more importantly, I just make sure to include the amended